This video will cover Chapter 14, Graduate Level Careers in Psychology for PSY 120, Careers in Psychology, Neuroscience, and Human Development. Now, primarily what we're talking about in this chapter is what do people do with a doctoral degree, either a PhD, an EDD, a PsyD. What kind of work are those professionals doing? In each of our subject area chapters, like social, developmental, clinical, counseling, there's a section of those chapters that talks about graduate opportunities. This chapter is going to pull some of that information together and focus on the types of career paths that people with those doctoral degrees and occasionally with master's degree, what kind of pursuits are they going to be engaging in? One of those career paths is being a college professor in psychology, neuroscience, or human development and family science. Typically, professors are going to work in psychology programs or neuroscience programs, but they also may work out of schools of education, and that's where you're more likely to find human development and family science PhDs. You can also find psychologists, neuroscientists outside of psychology departments. If you are a PhD level industrial organizational psychologist or a human factors psychologist, or even a social psychologist, you may find yourself working in business or in engineering. On the more practice side, psychologists with clinical, health, or developmental backgrounds and those with neuroscience backgrounds may actually be teaching in medical schools because those are related fields to what they're doing. So what do professors do with their time? Obviously, we spend a lot of time teaching, preparing our classes, developing our courses, delivering our courses. You can find professors who teach 100% of their teaching load online, some who teach part of their load online, some who teach only in person, depending on the nature of their position and their preferences. There's also research, and institutions differ in based on the size and the purpose of the institution. The balance, like how much teaching, how much research, is going to differ based on the type of institution, but also on the type of position that the person is in. So on the research side, there's routinely an expectation that professors will be productive, that they will conduct research that's original, that they will work toward getting that research presented, peer-reviewed, and published. They may work on their own, or they may work with assistants and students, and they are frequently engaged in mentoring students that they're bringing up. There's also an expectation of doing service, and that's typically in two domains, service to the campus community, but then service to the wider community as well. On the campus community side, what a lot of professors are expected to do is committee work. So there are faculty committees, there are university-wide committees. For instance, I've served on a bunch of different committees over the course of my career. I've been on most recently, I've been on the Faculty Senate. I've also been chair of the Human, it was at one point in time it's called Human Subjects Committee. It's the Institutional Review Board. So I've done a lot of committee work. We're also expected to do advising. At a university like Mount, that's really important, and every faculty member has an advising load if they are full-time. We may also be engaged in administrative activities. Like I've been a department chair fairly often. On the service to the community side, every year when we're evaluated, we have to provide documentation of the kinds of community engagement that we do year to year. So, for example, on my CV, on my curriculum vitae, I have listed some of my community-based activities, like I currently volunteer at Pegasus Farm, which is a horseback riding facility for people with disabilities. and I volunteer there 5.5 hours a week, getting very dirty and playing with horses. But it's also a site where some of our students have interned as well. I also volunteer for a dog rescue, and I'm an unpaid board member of a nonprofit. So all of those things are evidence that I'm engaged in my local community. Now, I mentioned before that there are different expectations based on the kind of institution that you are a professor with. So at two-year or community colleges, typically you're going to teach more courses, and there are few, if any, research requirements. Teaching is the priority for these individuals. There will be expectations of community engagement and some service expectations, like committees and so on, but there will be little or no research expectations and little or no support for doing so. At smaller schools, at liberal arts schools, at small comprehensive universities like the University of Mount Union, the average expectation is that people in full-time jobs are going to be teaching 3 courses a term, sometimes 4, but the average is 3. There is some expectation of research, and that can also come coupled with making sure that you have students from the institution involved in the work that you're doing. Teaching is still prioritized, but there is some expectation of research and professional productivity. In addition, there are expectations of doing internal service, so committee work, advising, etc., and also an expectation of community engagement. At research institutions, at research universities, so these are sometimes referred to as R1s, so like Ohio State, University of Michigan, those are R1 institutions. Faculty members who are PhD holders in tenure-track jobs are typically going to be teaching 1 or 2 classes a term. Those may be courses that they teach with undergraduates. More likely they're going to be teaching a mixture of undergraduate and graduate courses. They are going to be expected to apply for and get research grants. They're expected to, especially early in their careers, be very productive, to do a lot of research, do a lot of writing, and to get publications. And in some institutions, there's a set number, and you have to get publications, not just any publication, it has to be in a top-ranked journal in order to continue building your career at that university. So generally speaking, R1s, research universities, research is the priority. And in some ways, that's the pathway for building that research university, is that these faculty members pulling grants, it's not so much that they're making a profit for the institution, but they're helping run the institution. You bring in money, you're going to have students that you're employing, you're going to have grad students who are working with you and achieving their own goals to get their own degrees, and you're going to put out research with the name of that institution on it. So research is the priority. At 4-year institutions, and when I look at what is Mount Union is considered a 4-year comprehensive college or university. We have a liberal arts tradition, but that's a little bit of semantics. 4-year universities that are not Research 1 or research universities, typically faculty are going to teach 4 or fewer courses a semester. There is some expectation of research. The number of projects published, the type of journal published in, those requirements are less than what you would see at a research institution. Both teaching and research are valued. Institutions vary tremendously in what kind of proportions. In some schools, teaching is way valued higher than research. In some others, it's pretty much equal. You need to show that you're very good in the classroom and that you're productive professionally. So it very much depends on the type of institution. Mount Union is kind of a hybrid between the liberal arts and the four-year university. So how do you train to become a college professor? If you're teaching part-time or you're teaching at a community college, a 2-year institution, sometimes the master's degree is sufficient. Since there's no expectation of research productivity in those smaller institutions, you may be able to teach with that master's degree independently. There has been a trend in recent years for an expectation of doctoral degrees, but right now the environment is in flux, so it's hard to say what will happen in the future. Sometimes I'll have students who they have their LPCC, so they're a licensed counselor, but they want to do a little bit of teaching. So they may take their master's degree. Like we have one part-time faculty member at Mount Union who is an LPCC. She's a licensed counselor, has a private practice, but she likes teaching too. So she picks up some part-time sections of courses, usually lower level courses, introductory courses, to deliver. And, that's certainly a hybrid possibility. I know a lot of clinicians and counselors who still like to teach every now and then, or they like to teach a little bit every semester. Sometimes they see it as a supplement to their income. Other times they just like it. They like the college environment, but they don't want to be a full-time faculty member. Achieving a doctoral degree will give you the most flexibility in terms of seeking employment as a faculty member. It gives you the most ability to get a full-time position and a full-time position with a certain degree of security. Now, the environment in higher education is in a period of transition. For about the last 10 years or so, there's been a decided movement away from tenure track type positions, which means you work at the institution for 6 to 7 years. You've shown that you have the competencies, you're a good fit for the institution, you're being productive, you're engaged in your community, and you're doing your service requirements with a high degree of competency. And the institution then can decide to grant you tenure. That means that you have job security unless you do something super inappropriate or you just stop doing your job as well as you should. So you can still be fired for cause, but you don't have to be concerned with constant threats to your employment. In recent years, so like in the last 10 years or so, there's been a movement toward having non-tenure track positions become more and more common. So typically what happens in the case of non-tenure track positions, you can have a doctoral degree, you're going to be expected to teach more courses than your tenure track colleagues, but you will not have service responsibilities. So you won't have to be on committees, you won't have to do advising, you're just going to teach more. So many universities are moving away from tenure track positions in the direction of these more professional positions. What you should do if you are interested in becoming an academic, becoming a professor, you need to start thinking about how to build your skills as a teacher. In graduate school, it has not been the norm for part of your graduate education to be training you in pedagogy, in actual teaching. Some programs do offer some mentorship and some workshops and maybe even a course or two, but it's not typical. So basically we kind of are tossed into the classroom to learn on the job. So what I did, and this remains kind of true, when I was looking for graduate programs, I asked a lot of questions about opportunities to teach and what kind of mentoring I would be given in teaching. And I got lucky. my major advisor in graduate school was heavily involved in research on pedagogy and was an exceptional mentor. So if you really want to become a teacher, you want to become a college professor and you want to be good at it, finding a program that offers support for that aspect is important. Some programs are purely research-based, and they will put you in the classroom and let you sink or swim. So keep that in mind. If you know that you want to be a professor full-time and you're seeking a position as an academic, like I said, look for grad programs that actually offer opportunities for teaching people how to be good teachers. You can also seek practical experiences. Like when I was looking at grad programs, if they didn't offer teaching assistantships, I did not apply to those programs because I knew I wanted to go into becoming a professor. I wanted to get in the classroom as soon as possible. I also knew some of my colleagues, my fellow students in my graduate program, who in addition to teaching assistantships that they did in our program, they also, after they got their master's degrees, because usually on your way to getting your PhD, you get a master's, they went out and got part-time jobs at universities nearby just to get more teaching experience. Also, look for mentors who can help you build your skills as a teacher. And those can become super important reference letters for you. You can have your lab supervisor, your research mentor write you a letter, and they can talk all about your research skills and abilities. But if you're applying for a position that is heavily teacher focused, and the evaluation criteria for that position are about teaching, having those letters of reference that show that you have solid skills, that you've sought out mentoring, that you've sought out additional opportunities to improve your teaching is going to go a long way. Now, in addition to teaching careers, there are also pure research positions in academic contexts. And this is especially the case in major universities, R1s, like the Ohio States of the world, where you have primarily research scientists who their full-time job is doing basic and applied research. I was playing around on LinkedIn the other day, and I noticed there were a lot of R1 jobs that were really focused in on certain aspects of health. So there appear to be quite a few health psychology research positions that institutions are investing in at the present time. You should know that if you're going to be seeking a research career in an academic setting, you will be expected to apply for, write, and secure grants to fund your research. Your institution is not going to fund you fully. Instead, you'll be expected to pull down money to run your own projects and to bring those research studies to their fruition. If people advance in their careers, research scientists may take on the role of a supervisor, a mentor. If they are the head of their lab and they're the people who are pulling down the grants, they're going to have kind of their own little group of graduate and postdoctoral students who actually conduct the hands-on research. If you're in that advanced position, you will be, supervising the work, often drafting and writing the papers in concert with your graduate and postdoctoral students. One of the advantages of this kind of work is that there are opportunities for travel and for public engagement. So a lot of these researchers are going to go to conferences. They may be called upon to consult. They may also be called upon to write op-eds or to write topic pieces for the popular press. These positions are really, really competitive. And what that means is you can't say, okay, I want to only work in Ohio, in Columbus. You really can't do that and seek an R1 research position. You have to go where the job is and fill it. So since these positions are super competitive, and they're going to be more competitive than normal in the coming years, given the kind of upheaval that we're experiencing right now in terms of grant funding for Research One institutions. Publishing your research is also very, very competitive, and especially early career, the stakes are very high. As people advance in their careers, if they suddenly stop being able to secure grant funding, that can mean the end of their work at that particular institution. So being able to get grants and then do research and then publish that research, your job is going to be contingent on your ability to do those things. Now, another opportunity for PhD level individuals and sometimes master's level is to have research careers in the private sector. Many psychologists are either starting out from their original careers, or they're retooling their post-academia careers in applied settings, in business, in industry, and so on. So a lot of the graduate level careers are research-based. So it's where you're taking your research skills and you're applying them in real-world settings. And there are a lot of, there's a diverse range of possibilities here. Careers in industry are different than academia, though. Academia has certain advantages, and industry has certain advantages. Academia tends to pay less than jobs in industry that pay more, but in academia have more flexibility, more independence, and more ability to exercise your own creativity. Careers in industry, they're industry driven. You're not usually picking and choosing your research projects. You're doing the research projects that are demanded by your position. So, and another difference is that research is faster paced. There's a time demand. The company says, I need answers to this and this and this question, and I need it in 6 months. The turnaround is often very, very fast. So like if you're in product development or in marketing and you're a market research analyst or something like that, you may be required that in a very short period of time to design a study, collect the data, and write a report and present it to the stakeholders with a fairly quick turnaround. You're often going to be working in teams, and that can enhance your productivity. There are lots of opportunities for psychologists to work in business and industry, especially if they have that research background. And they will typically have more access to direct funding, so less dependency on grants and more reliance on the organization itself to fund projects. Research questions, though, as I mentioned before, they tend to be determined by the needs of the company, not by your own individual interests. Now, there's the occasional rock star who can really punch their own card and say, I'm studying this, but that's not the typical. Generally speaking, and I mentioned this already, salaries are higher in industry, and there are more regular hours, and in some cases the benefits may be better than what you see in academia. In academia, on the other hand, you do have more schedule flexibility, and for a lot of us, more free time when classes are not in session. There are also research careers in government spaces. Researching government organizations means that, politicians, policymakers, people in positions of power in government agencies, they're going to kind of dictate what the questions are that need to be answered, and then researchers are going to be pulled into those government jobs to conduct research to answer those questions. Now, in 2025, we're in a, I'll use the word interesting place in terms of research careers in government. We're in a place right now where the presidential administration is limiting and in some cases removing government sectors where research has been heavy. So, for example, in the Department of Education, that was a really solid area for PhDs to seek out research type positions. But that situation has changed in recent months. Over time, that may change back again. One advantage of research careers in government is that there is no shortage of questions to be answered. So you're going to get to study a lot of different topics, engage in a lot of different projects, and sometimes you might be doing so at the same time. The projects may be diverse in terms of topic. So what happens frequently is the type of psychologists that are sought out for these types of positions are really solid research methods generalists. So they can study pretty much any topic by using the tools of their trade. Most of the research projects are going to be initiated through the government, and there will be a timeline. So often there's a practical problem. They need data in order to inform what solutions are proposed for the problem. So the researcher is called upon to, in a fairly quick turnaround, produce the data that's going to help solve that problem. As we're seeing right now in 2025, shifts and changes in public opinion and interests can create a great deal of upheaval. Sometimes political leaders are going to remove projects, initiate new ones. In some cases, that environment can mean that subjects that you've studied for a very long time are no longer in favor, and other things are required to be studied. Research jobs in government do tend to include a lot of supervisory work because you're often hiring contractors to come in from outside of the government to do a lot of the day-to-day work, and the career government researchers are often in the management side of that. Routinely, this kind of research involves working on a team. The research questions are typically applied in nature as opposed to theoretical. You will find that if you are a creative researcher, you're comfortable working in an interdisciplinary team, you're going to be pretty happy in this kind of work. So a lot of government positions, policy positions in government are filled by psychologists, especially social psychologists, sociologists, statisticians, computer scientists, and so on. There are also opportunities for psychologists and also, people with degrees in neuroscience, especially cognitive neuroscience, in the armed forces. Now, these are typically clinical and counseling jobs, but there are also research jobs in the military. When I was a college student, one of my first part-time jobs was I was basically a lab assistant. I fed rhesus macaques. They're really unpleasant animals, but I can't blame them because they were caged. Anyway, my research mentor, he was also my academic advisor, he was doing research for the Air Force, and they were looking at passive exposure to laser light because there were some concerns about use of lasers in the cockpits of fighter jets. So they needed to know what was the impact of these sort of passive exposures on visual acuity. And he was doing that research using rhesus macaques at the time. Now, a lot of the jobs that are currently available for psychologists are in service delivery. So when I go on job boards like Indeed, there is a high demand for PhD level licensed psychologists to do direct service delivery and to supervise master's level counselors in their work with service members, veterans, and their families. There are, in fact, deployed psychologists, and these are typically people who are members of the military who also have training as psychologists who are deployed with troops. Some psychologists who are deployed are not actual active duty with the military, so there's a mixture there, but they may be deployed with troops to provide direct services. And that can include, delivering counseling, but also critically assessment on the fly. Some military psychologists are also involved in that sort of IO space where they're doing personnel selection, testing, classification, and so on. As I mentioned before, they may be conducting research. And that can be on a wide range of topics, anything from, impacts of isolation from family to experiences with experiences of deployed individuals in countries around the world. And also on the neuroscience side and the experimental psychology side, there's a lot of research on interacting with technology. So human factors research, usability research, and so on is very much a place of growth for research psychologists. Some psychologists who work with the armed forces are actually going to start out as commissioned officers, and they may go into leadership and management roles that may be in the VA space. It may be in other spaces within the military. In some cases, you may join the military, straight out of college, and start working in the direction of getting your psychology degree. And in some cases, the military can help fund your graduate education. That's something to do your homework about and find out what the possibilities are there. Most psychologists who work with the military, if you look at the rank and file people who are doing service delivery, most of them, though, are not members of the military themselves. They're highly trained professionals. One of my former students was a neuroscience major at Mount Union, went on and got an advanced degree in clinical psychology, and is now a service provider with the VA in Cleveland, really looking at both PTSD and the psychological aspects of brain injuries. There are civilian psychologists who work for government agencies that collaborate with the military as well. And those are kinds of positions that, they are kind of vulnerable to whatever political entities are in power at the time. But there are psychologists who work for those agencies. Sometimes they're consultants, either in the service provision area or in the research area. Another space where PhD level and occasionally master's level psychologists work is in nonprofits. They may occupy many different roles in those nonprofit organizations, and it's going to vary by the type of organization and the specialty that the psychologist has. In some cases, the nonprofits are service delivery organizations. So you may work with a nonprofit hospital, for example, or a nonprofit treatment facility where you would be doing therapy, group sessions, individual sessions, and so on. There are also research roles in nonprofits. There are big nonprofit corporations that engage in original research, and especially if they want to do survey research, psychologists are a hot property there because they typically have the background and training to do survey research and to present it in a way that can communicate what answers to the questions the organizations have. And that can inform policy. Social services, nonprofits, think tanks often are engaged with government. So they may be asked by the government, they may be pulled in by government entities to do policy analyses, to review the literature, and to do research. And the topics are kind of open-ended. There are lots of opportunities there. Some other kinds of nonprofit roles. Having a research background can often prepare people to become grant writers. When you're seeking out funding to help your nonprofit continue to be successful, they may consult with researchers, with service providers, with all kinds of administrative stakeholders to determine what the organization's needs and goals are, and then to build grants to help them achieve those goals. You may also find PhD psychologists, neuroscientists, HDFS people running nonprofits. So they may be in the director's position where they have the research background to help them run the organization as it does assessment. So doing needs assessments, ensuring that objectives are met, coordinating committees, planning work, overseeing funding, assisting with grant writing, and so on. So the program director, it's kind of like in the nonprofit world, it's like CEOs in the profit world. You're running the organization with executive directors. Executive directors guide the entire organization. So a program director is kind of the CEO of a specific program within a larger organization. The executive director runs the whole organization, and their oversight job is going to be managing the strategy for the organization, paying attention to managing the resources, and making sure that your organization has financial stability. Now, depending on the size of the organization, there are some people who, if it's a smaller nonprofit, the executive director may also be performing all of the same jobs as a program director. In larger organization, it's going to be more hierarchical. You'll have several program directors for each of the separate programs, and then an executive director who is the ultimate authority. There are also careers in publishing for academically trained graduate degree holders. Especially in the textbook publishing world, you're considered a subject matter expert if you work in this space. There are opportunities as sales representatives, and some of these opportunities you can start at the ground floor and work your way up at the bachelor's level, but more and more sales representatives for publishing companies are looking for people with a little bit more sales expertise. So they sometimes sales representatives may have a master's degree, not so much the PhD. Acquisitions editors, those are people who are looking to find books that the company can purchase to represent. In some cases, those people may be highly trained, and having that subject matter expert status may mean that you have a PhD or another kind of doctoral degree to show that you know what you're talking about in making decisions about which books are viable for your company. Development editors are working with actual manuscripts. So if a publishing company has a lot of titles in the psychology area, they may have development editors who have an advanced degree in that area who can work with authors to edit manuscripts and make sure that they meet the standards of the organization. Content development editors will work to add additional materials that go with the textbook. So, for example, my social psychology textbook has a bunch of what are called ancillaries and digital content. So they supply me with templates for PowerPoints, video files, graphics files. They also supply, I don't use it, but they supply a dashboard learning management system that you could use if you wanted to through the publisher. Somebody has to build all that, and it's typically a team Some of them are instructional designers, but they often work with subject matter experts, and that would be the person with the advanced degree in psychology, neuroscience, or human development. Communications editors coordinate publications, so they may prepare review articles that are then put out online to communicate with the wider audience what kind of offerings the publishing company has. Finally, there are opportunities for being a writer. Technical writers are often hired. Sometimes they're referred to as scientific writers, who will review manuscripts and then produce summaries of those manuscripts that are then provided to readers. There are lots of curated sites out there where a science writer or a technical writer is going to write those summaries. One site that you could take a look at to see what I mean is something called SciPost, Psypost. And basically they have science writers who are subject matter experts. They're people with advanced degrees who read research articles in journals and then write summaries of them so that a person without an advanced degree can actually understand what was going on in those studies. Sometimes writers are employed by universities, by hospitals, by other kinds of institutions. And those writers, their job is to pull together information so that the public information officers can create press releases. So they may actually develop summaries and explanations and publicity pieces that then are distributed to the media. So, like, for example, a big university may have writers that they employ that have advanced degrees who will summarize the research conducted by other researchers at that institution and put them out to the public as a way of publicizing the work of the faculty at that institution. Some writers work specifically in grant writing. Still others who are qualified as medical writers may work with a medical research team, building reports, helping the team to develop those reports and deliver them. Finally, some psychologists do science writing as freelancers. Sometimes they're employed by newspapers, magazines, etc. And those can be really interesting jobs. For some faculty members who are academics primarily, they may also have side gigs where they're doing freelance writing. They may produce podcasts. They may produce writing that they submit to newspapers and magazines and so on. And that concludes my coverage of this chapter.